Ultimate Collectibles here. This is episode 4 of the Wolverine series. What I mean by that is I'm actually reviewing a bunch of the Wolverine pieces I have because he is probably arguably my favorite character. The first episode was Nom Nom Chubby Wolverine, Little Fatty. Second episode was Phase 2 of the Wolverine Chronicles, Wolverine vs. Wendigo. Phase 3 was Custom, Wolverine X-Force vs. Ninjas. And Phase 4 is this bad boy. Ultimate Collectibles here with XM quarter scale Weapon X. I just realized I have approximately 24 XM pieces and quite a few more coming, and I haven't done a review on any of them. And XM to me is one of the best companies out there. It's not necessarily the best, but definitely one of the best. But this is one of the best pieces out there, and it blows my mind how often I see this for sale still at retail. If you don't have this and you've been on the fence, please watch the review, but hopefully after you see this, you will pull the trigger because it is a phenomenal piece. It is not the best Weapon X out there, in my opinion. There is a custom piece that just barely beats this one, but jumping right in, I got this from an XM reseller, and I've had it for probably close to a year. I got it shortly after they started shipping, and it's a piece I really don't look at enough to appreciate. But right now you can get it for about $900 US shipped, in that range, and I think the original price was about $8.99 SGD with Singapore dollars, which is close to about $700 US plus, you know, a couple hundred of shipping usually from overseas. Came in a standard XM box. XM boxes where it's a bitch to get off the top because it's like probably what having a baby feels like. And everything was packed really well, no issues, with the exception of the back screen here did have a broken piece on it, which unfortunately it is what it is, but thankfully it faces the back, and I don't really ever plan to resell this guy anyway. Concept and design on this is pretty obvious. It's Weapon X was just created and he's breaking out. They did a really good job. The other Weapon X I talked about is that I'm a big fan of. He's actually in the mountains, so where he just escaped from the facility, so he's outside. But he's just emerging out of the scene. He broke the glass that was probably encaging him, and Wolverine, as usual, he's pissed, but of course they just put him through one of the most painful procedures ever. Putting adamantium in your body hurts, I've heard. I have a friend. And there's all the monitors and bio screens behind him, and this actually lights up somewhere as well. I can't remember. I do have batteries in it, I just can't remember how it lights up. Some of these lights light up on it. I'm not a big fan of statues with light up features. They're cool to have, but I never actually use them. Wolverine is breaking out. He's covered, you know, he's almost naked and he's covered in a liquid, which we're going to talk about when we get to the sculpt. He still has the traditional Weapon X head on him that you see in the comics, and I think they even did that in the Apocalypse Weapon X movie. That was a really cool scene. His claws are shiny because they're brand new. They haven't killed anybody yet, but that's probably about seconds away. And they have the monitoring packs on him. And I love what XM did. When I first saw this piece, I didn't want to get it. I wasn't a fan, and then I just pulled the trigger because I love Wolverine and I got a good deal on it. And now that I have it, it is my absolute favorite XM piece, without a doubt, of the couple dozen I have. Paint and sculpt. So starting at the bottom, it's a you know, futuristic, not futuristic, but it's you can tell it's a technological base. So it has keypads and gears and coils and everything else scientific on it, where I just can't come up with the right words today, where you can tell it was something, a contraption that was housing something and monitoring something very, very cautiously. It really goes true to what you think of when you think of where Wolverine was created, whether you're pulling that from the MCU or you're pulling it from some of the traditional Weapon X Wolverine comics that were out there. There's a lot of different paints in here, and it's a very good factory paint job. They could have just made it look brand new and shiny, but it looks rustic with the different coppers and rusty colors that they have mixed in with the silvers and the blacks and the grays. And there's even some yellow up on the sides. And it's done throughout really well. They spared no expense at putting details and texture, and even on the side it says Capsule 1, Department K. Very cool. And I'm going to talk about the screens and the bio monitors and things like that. First of all, I don't like how this was put together. It falls apart very easily. I think XM could have done a better job with that, and some of these pieces in the back feel very cheap, which for weight purposes is nice, but overall it does lessen the piece. Thankfully it's behind everything, so you really can't notice. Some of the monitors are adjustable, which is nice depending on how you want to display it. And they follow some of the similar paint colors as the base that we talked about. Really cool underneath Wolverine. So first you have this glass clear resin with some yellow colors in there, which is very apparent that this was part of the capsule or cage that held him, and he just broke out. Then on the bottom, this is a next level effect, and when this came out everybody was raving about it, and I'm still raving about it. It looks like real water. It still looks like real water. And there's coils and cables that were obviously connected to Weapon X as he was being housed here, and those are submerged and some are dripping with the water, but it is probably one of the coolest effects I've seen on statues. And to further on that same type of water effect is all over Wolverine. So obviously inside this capsule it was Empire Strikes Back, Luke Skywalker type scenario after he was frozen out in the on the planet Hoth, and he was inside of here and he just broke out, and that water looks like real water dripping down him, and it's this clear resin effect. And I think one of the reasons it looks so good is because the sculpt on Wolverine is so good. Not only when where he has his muscles, I mean, he's very lean, and we've talked about this before in a review. With the healing factor he has, I wouldn't think there'd be much body fat, but he's very lean, and you can see the skeletal structure inside of him with the muscles on top of it. And I love how they did Wolverine's hair. It looks like real hair, and again it's sculpted in there, so both the paint, the dark paint for the hair and the flesh tones for the skin really complement that underneath that clear resin. Then the little boxes, the monitoring boxes on him that you assume, they're pretty cool as well. They have this green and red and blue colors on them, and this red and black wire running between them all the way up to his helmet. And there is a leather strap, kind of like a belt strap, that looks really cool. It looks like mixed media, but in fact it is Sculpt, and it has more of that clear water resin that just makes this statue pop. And his chest and his arms, again, one thing not only the hair on the back of his arms, but the hair on his chest, and they gave him, of course, a great six-pack. But I love how you can see his veins. You can tell he's flexing to his greatest extent, and you can see the blue-black painted in there, and the veins are rising up almost like a bodybuilder would. And throughout they have the little nodules where he was connected, and the paint around them, there's this slight redness because there's some irritation that would be there, which doesn't really follow the storyline of Wolverine, because he would instantly heal, but it would look weird if it wasn't red around it. So it was very intentional, done very well. And moving up to his portrait, so he has two portraits as we didn't talk about yet. He has two portraits. One is this one right here with the helmet on, which this is my favorite. And then they have the other one, which is unmasked. I'm not a big fan of this one. It is decent. It is pretty comic accurate. I just am personally not a fan. But moving back to this one with the helmet, so the helmet has Test Subject 1. I kind of wish they would have written Weapon X on there instead, but there's a lot of different nodules, and there's some antennas and some divots and some screws, so it almost looks like the helmet is screwed onto his head. And then on the sides, whether they're laser sighting or microphones or whatever it is for him, but it looks really cool. And then the red visor, the Luke Skywalker visor, so you can see his eyes through it. So they didn't not sculpt the eyes excellent. It was still very excellent underneath this, even though they didn't need to do that. And then around his mouth, you have some of the facial hair, and they did an okay job with his teeth and his lips and his gums. It's not the greatest. Looking up close, it's okay. So last thing to talk about on him is his claws. They're metal, they're shiny, they're perfect. They're the perfect length. They are reflective, just like Wolverine would look like if he just unleashed them for the very first time. So this is why this is one of my favorite pieces. I think concept and design is a knock out of the park. It's the very first Weapon X, right after he got adamantium. The water effect alone, even if the sculpt and the paint were just okay, the water effect would still make this one of the most amazing statues, but they nailed it on top of the sculpt and the paint of Wolverine's body, of what's below him. I love this piece. If you are on the fence, pick it up like that. You shouldn't hesitate. And with that being said, this ends episode 4. Episode 5, I don't know what it's going to be yet. It depends. I have quite a few pieces arriving next week, and I think a couple of those are Wolverine. But I appreciate you watching. Please subscribe. Please share. Take care now. Thanks.